iTestify is about testifying of what Jesus Christ has done and can do in each of our lives. Through testimony of people just like you and through study of His Word, our prayer is to encourage each follower of Christ to be a light in this world. So let your light shine before men, that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven. Matthew 5:16.
Hello and welcome to iTestify. Today we have our special guest here to share his testimony, Mike Tuazon, who is the director of Souls West. Can you tell us a little bit about that and what you do?
Yeah, Souls West is the Pacific Union Conference's School of Evangelism. We specialize in training leaders and equipping our students so that they can go to different churches and teach the churches how to do evangelism in very practical ways and also in how to do it corporately as well. SOULS is an acronym. It stands for the Seventh-day Adventist Outreach Leadership School.
Oh, wow. And what do you do as director?
I don't think the better question is what I don't do. I think it's many hats, but really the coordination of everything, making sure the schedule's set logistically. I'm in charge of all the hiring and stuff and making sure that we have enough staff. I'm in charge of the recruiting and visiting all the programs. On top of that, building the relationships with all of the churches that we work with and all the local conferences that we have to go to as well.
Wow. And you still have a very good relationship with the students. You get to talk to them.
Oh yeah, that's probably part of the best part of the job is being able to interact with 50 or so young people who want to study the Bible. And so, yeah, definitely a really good relationship. They graduate and become some of my really good friends.
Wow. I heard that recently you went to Europe and you got to see the different sites that happened of the Reformation.
Yes.
That happened. So can you tell us a little bit about the trip that you took?
Yes. Yeah, it was a really good trip. We went through and we went to all sorts of different places. I don't know if, I think in the more of the part where the Bible study, I'm going to get into everyone and what they contributed to the Bible, but we had such a fabulous time seeing the founding fathers of the Christian church.
Yeah, so you are involved in a lot of different projects now, and basically it seems like your life is ministry, but it wasn't always like that.
No,
right?
It wasn't. No, not at all.
Will you share with
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I was born and raised in the church, but I didn't have a relationship with God. And so I had to go through some ups and downs in life. And I think one of the key times was when I was looking for mentorship in my life. My parents, they got a divorce, and I didn't really have much mentorship or someone to look up to or guide me in the church. And so I got involved with the wrong crowd, got involved with the wrong people, and that slippery slope led me to basically leave God altogether. The things that I knew to do what were right, the things that I grew up with, the Bible truths, I dismissed it. And it led to me going into another direction and wanting to just make a lot of money and just work for a big Fortune 500 company.
Wow. So you went and did that?
Yeah. I went to a good school, and I got into one of the top internships in the nation where they basically match you up with a Fortune 500 company, and I got placed with either the Federal Reserve, retail buying, and insurance sales. And it's an incredible experience. I think it was good for me at the time because you took a battery of tests and you sat through all the interviews and were interviewed by so many different people. And finally, they matched you with a company, and I got involved in a corporate retail buying firm where you know, they basically are in charge of many department stores, and they tell big fashion designers like Ralph Lauren and Tommy Hilfiger and what to do. They basically make or break a lot of these designers. And so I was in the buying office, and you know, it was unique because we had to figure out, okay, you know, I can see how God was preparing me for life of ministry, because even in the corporate world, we had to figure out, okay, when I'm buying women's moderate separate casuals for the store of Utah, I need to buy more peasant skirts.
I don't even know what that is.
You know, versus in LA when they're going to have a different kind of dress to them, you know. And then my second year, I got placed in the #1 department, and the #1 department is fragrance and cosmetics. And I didn't know this, but they were actually grooming me and setting me up to be part of the executive training program, or part of the, I guess, the managers of the firm. And during that time, that's when I had a decision to make, because I also started to give my life to God. I started to get back on track.
So you completely left.
Yeah, I completely left. Living in Hollywood.
You were living in, living in Hollywood, and you didn't have any semblance of any type of faith.
No,
whatsoever.
absolutely not.
So was there anything what brought you back?
Yeah, that was a good question. I was trying to find happiness, you know, and you think you're going to find it in money. You think you're going to find it in relationships or nice things. And so I tried to do that, but I started to realize that none of those things brought me happiness. It was an empty road every time. It was broken cisterns. And so I remember one time, after hanging out with some friends in LA and going out to some bar or whatever it was, and just feeling like trash the next morning, and smelling like cigarettes and all sorts of stuff that's in this bar, I remember just saying, you know, I might as well go to church. You know, I don't have anything to do, might as well go to church. And so I remember at the time, I don't know if you guys remember, but there used to be AOL, America Online, dial-up internet. There was no such thing as Google Maps and stuff. And so I went on.
Okay, we're not that young.
I went online and I found a church that was near me. There was in Hollywood, but for whatever reason, there was a specific church that I was drawn to, and it was further away. And so the next morning, I remember I printed out my directions for MapQuest, and I started to find this church, and I got lost in the crazy hustle and bustle of LA. And as I got lost and couldn't find my way, I remember I sent up some half-hearted prayer, and I said, God, if you're real, I'm going to follow the next car, and if that car gets me to church, then I know you're real, and if it doesn't, then you can kiss this whole religion thing goodbye.
Wow.
And I remember it was a white Mercedes-Benz. I flipped a U-turn somewhere in the streets of LA, and that car brought me right to the church. Wow. Like, it was pretty crazy.
Wow, so the car brought you better there than MapQuest.
Yeah, it's right.
That's why MapQuest went out of business.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. They did. Yeah, and so I went out to the church, and I thought, okay, God, if you're, you know, maybe that was lucky. You know, now I know why the Bible talks about not asking for signs, because we're never going to be satisfied with that. And I just thought maybe that was pure luck. And so then I said, okay, if you're real, I want to see you. Like, I don't really think you're real. And so I remember going into the church in the sanctuary, and I remember they had one of those beautiful stained glass windows in the back. And I thought, okay, if you're real, maybe angels will pop out or something. I'll see something miraculous. But nothing really happened. And I was about to leave, and that's when someone after church invited me to fellowship lunch. And I didn't know this, but a group of young people had just gotten converted. They had just given their hearts to God, and they were so excited to share their faith, and I was that one person that they were going to share their faith with. So from after church till 9 p.m., they gave me a Bible study on every single fundamental belief you could think of. I mean, they didn't know what to do. They just were so excited about the truth they had. They gave me a Bible study on like Daniel 2 and the mark of the beast, and they gave me a Bible study on faith and works.
How old were these kids?
They were 18, 19.
And you were?
19, I think, at the time.
You were 19?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so a couple of them were older than me, a couple of them were younger than me. It was a youth group that had just gotten on fire for God.
But basically, these are your peers.
Yeah, I guess so. But yeah, I'd never met them before or never seen them before.
Wow.
They just saw that I was new, and they saw that I was unconverted. They saw that I had a sports car, and they saw that I didn't really care for spiritual things, and they just let me have it till then. They wouldn't let me go. I mean, they were so zealous. They started covering everything you could think of. And when they were done with the Bible, they started talking about conspiracy theories. I mean, they talked about everything under the sun you could possibly think of. And I thought these people were absolutely nuts. Crazy. So then I said, okay, well, this is nuts. But I forgot my prayer that I said, God, I really want to see you. I want to see if you're real. Well, I got 9 hours of Bible study
Of who God is.
who God is,
Yeah.
basically, you know?
Yeah.
Why didn't you escape? I mean, you didn't have to sit there for 9 hours. You could have been like, I have somewhere to go. It's Saturday.
I was drawn to it. I couldn't leave. I really was. It was like hearing truth for the first time. You're like,
Okay.
really? The Bible says that?
Okay.
You know? Like, here I was growing up. I grew up a Christian my whole life, but I didn't
Never.
know the truths from the Bible. So that was new.
So you thought they were crazy on one hand, but on the other hand, you were drawn to
Yes.
what they were saying.
Absolutely.
So you had kind of something you were trying to sort out in your mind.
Yes,
Conflicting.
yes, it was definitely conflicting. I was like, well, first I was impressed that they knew their Bible. Every question I asked them, and I would say, how do you know that? I thought you were saved by grace. And they said, yeah, but there's more than just John 3:16 in the Bible. And they showed me a couple of other passages in James showing the importance of works as well and keeping God's law. And then I said, well, God looks at the heart. And I remember them showing me Jeremiah 17:9. Well, your heart is wicked and deceitful and desperately wicked above all else. And every question or comment I had, they had an answer, but from the Bible. And I was drawn to that.
Yeah.
Absolutely drawn to that.
So
It's-
then did you go back to that church the next week, or how?
Oh no, I was like, these people are nuts. I will never see them again. And so I remember leaving that parking lot. I remember bumping my Eminem as loud as I could and just leaving, just taking off and just, just forget them, type mentality. But God knew better, and so the next week, we had an internship thing and a training, actually on Saturday, and I wasn't keeping the Sabbath. I wasn't doing anything, and so I went to that. But it turns out during this event, it never happened before, but my contact, it got stuck in my eye. Like, I don't know what happened, but it got stuck in my eye. Long story short, it turned out to be really bad. I actually couldn't see anymore. And I was like blinded for a couple days. I actually had to leave that internship. And it put me flat on my back for a couple of days where I actually had to think about the things that were presented to me from the Bible.
Wow.
So how Paul had kind of a Damascus experience where his sight was taken away. Same thing happened to me. I mean, literally, I've never had this before, but a particle of my contact just got torn off and broken in my eye where my eye got infected. And
Wow.
I couldn't see, I couldn't do anything, I couldn't be there. It was just bad. I mean,
But it gave you time to think.
Yeah,
And
I mean-
think about the word.
Yeah.
And I'm also curious, is that why you wear glasses now?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I hate contacts. That's part of the reason why, yes. Sharp.
Makes sense.
So after these couple days of thinking,
I still didn't want to see these guys again. I thought they were weird. I thought they were legalistic. But they knew their Bible. That was the dichotomy in my mind. But I remember a couple of months later, one of them said, hey, there's an event. We're speaking at a church. Do you have anything? And I remember I said, I don't really have anything. And I went to that church, and I felt as though the sermon was custom made for me. It was a message on Romans chapter 7, and it was talking about this dichotomy of this person in Romans 7 who's trying to do what's right but can't. And I remember just thinking, that's how I feel. I know to do what's right, but I can't. I'm drawn to the things of the world. And I remember it was August 24, 2002. At the end, after that, they invited me, and we had more Bible studies on faith. And I remember that evening, for the first time, I remember praying and saying, okay, God, I don't know what I'm doing here, but I'm going to ask you and invite you into my heart. And I still remember that moment. I still remember tears streaming down my face. I didn't know what I was getting myself into, but somehow I had the courage and I mustered enough to say that, and God changed my life after that.
What did your life look like after that?
It was a work of progress. The first thing I did was I was convicted to give up some of the things I was doing. I was going out to bars and clubs. So I said, I probably can't do that anymore. And I said, what's influencing me a lot is some of the music I'm listening to, so I should probably get rid of that too. So those were probably the first things I did, was some of the things I knew that almost everyone knows is probably not the best for you. I gave that up. And so that was what my life started to look like from there. And then I started to just get involved and said, let me at least share what God has done. So I started to just share what God had done to my friends and my family back home. And they thought it was a stage. They thought that it was just a passing stage. Mike's gone crazy, but he'll go back to being normal in a few months. And from then, I just kept growing and growing and growing. And kept learning and learning and learning to the point where I wanted to do this the rest of my life.
So you became one of those crazy people.
I guess I became one of the crazy people. Yes, yes, good observation.
But you don't necessarily go 8 hours at a time, though.
Yes, no. No, don't do that.
And so you found yourself, you left Fortune 500 companies and all that life behind, and then you started working for God.
Yeah, it was a little bit gradual. I remember when I graduated college, I had a choice. I had to pick either this retail buying firm that paid well and that you would make 6 figures very quickly, and you would, have basically everything paid for, and they would subsidize your MBA. And I had that route. Or there was a small firm at the time that I had interned with as well, and the pay was half of what this other place was paying me, but they would give me Sabbaths off and they would let me go on mission trips, because I started to now, in my free time and during college, just wanting to do things. Any free time I had, I wanted to do something for God. And I think that was a big decision. I chose working for the place that paid half, just so that I can have the freedoms of being able to practice what I was convicted of. And then from there, God, I think God is so wise. He takes us in stages.
Yeah.
And then from there, I remember just, even though I was working for a small internship, a consulting firm, I remember that any free time I had, I wanted to get involved in ministry. So that led me starting different youth conferences in the area, getting involved in ministries, and monumentally getting involved with ASI and finding all these different avenues. And someone approached me one day and they said, it seems as though in your free time all you want to do is ministry. Have you thought about doing that full time? And it was a church denominational employee who still said that to me. And I thought and prayed about it and said, yeah, that would probably be the best. I mean, that's what I'd like to do. Might as well. Someone once told me, even before I was converted or knew God, if you want to be happy in life, find out what you like doing and figure a way to get paid for it.
Yeah.
And so from there, that's when it opened up, and I got a call to start off as the business manager and evangelism director for Souls West.
Wow.
So that's kind of how it started.
And then that led to your becoming director.
Yeah, that's a story in and of itself. It was within 3 to 6 months, I already was cast into being director of the school.
Wow.
So just the way that God had it planned. So there was actually one key incident I almost forgot, but I'd like to share this. There was a pivotal point when I was working in the world for this consulting firm that gave me freedoms, and right before Souls West, where I remember my friends and I went to a Mormon ward right here in Redlands, and we had these ideas, let's go ahead and convert the church, let's go and basically Bible thump these Mormons. And when I went into there and to study the Bible with them and show them about the Sabbath, we ended up becoming convicted because they told us about the dedication they had. They told us about that they're on a 2-year mission. They don't get paid for it. And because of what they shared with us, it convicted my friends and I to live life different. And I basically said, you know what? These guys take 2 years off. Why don't we do that? So that's when I made the decision to leave the corporate world and to resign and to say, let's go out on faith and preach a couple of evangelistic meetings and just go out and do something for God. And I dared 4 of 5 of my friends to do it. So 5 of us, we quit our jobs and we went all over and preached evangelistic meetings. We had 0 training, didn't know what we were doing. Jerry Page in Central California was the president, was crazy enough to let us do it. And when it was all said and done, we finished our evangelistic meetings, and we had hundreds of baptisms and people who committed their lives to God. And It Is Written partnered with us as well. Actually got mentored by Sean Boonstra during the process. And ASI heard about it, and they featured us in what we were doing. And from there, Souls West kind of heard about it and said, what you did over there, would you implement over at Souls West? So that was kind of the bridge that got me into full-time ministry and working at Souls.
Yeah, basically a grassroots.
Yeah.
Really, really grassroots.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you step out in faith.
Yeah.
So Mike, you went from being in the church to leaving the church to being convicted to go back to the church by some really on fire Christians.
Yes.
Yeah.
And now becoming a director of a school that gets people on fire.
On fire.
Yeah.
And you recently went to take these students to Europe.
Yes.
And why don't you tell us about that experience and why you went?
Yeah, I think we all know that this past October was the 500-year anniversary of the Reformation. And we wanted to do something special out there. We wanted to be there. We wanted our students to experience it. And so October 31, 2017 marked the 500 years when Martin Luther posted the 95 Thesis in Wittenberg. And so we decided to take our students there, but we wanted to do more than that. We wanted to take them through the Reformation. And I personally, for me, personally wanted to see how each of the men that we hear about, that we read about in the Great Controversy, how they impacted us and what they contributed to modern day Protestantism. And so there's a verse I'd like to share, and it's found in Romans 1, verse 17. And this verse was the rallying cry of the Reformation. Romans 1, verse 17. In Romans chapter 1, verse 17, the Bible says, "For therein is righteousness of God revealed from faith to faith, as it is written, the just shall live by faith." This was Martin Luther's favorite passage, and I believe it was many of the Bible writers' favorite passage, because you see that this scripture is repeated 4 other times in the entire scriptures. There's something about the just living by faith, and we wanted to see it tangibly. And so what we did, my wife and I, we started in London, and we went to Oxford University. This is probably one of the most precious possessions that I own. It was given by a friend, and it's an Oxford Bible. And to be able to go to Oxford University, where John Wycliffe studied, where he taught, and where he translated the Bible into English for the first time, was just a pivotal point in my life. In fact, in Great Controversy, there's this quote I'd never read before. A friend shared it with me. The book Great Controversy says very particularly that John Wycliffe was like John the Baptist, where there was no one before or no one after him. The reforms that he did, the reforms that he made, was monumental and groundbreaking, so much so that it shook basically the Christian church, or changed the church in such a way that we have Protestantism today. And the thing about it is, many people credit Martin Luther as the start of the Reformation. In my research and looking at it, it was before Martin Luther. In fact, John Wycliffe was the one who was the first to translate the Bible into English. Now, here's the fascinating thing. From London, you see the Reformation going to Prague, in the Bohemian Empire at that time. And how that happened was Huss and Jerome were key individuals in Prague. And Jerome studied in Oxford University. A lot of people don't know that. And when he went to Oxford University, that's when he got the teachings of John Wycliffe. Jerome brought that back to Prague, and he was good friends with with John Huss. And John Huss is the one with the big name. He was the one who was the senior pastor of the biggest church of the time. We called it the Church of Bethlehem. It sat 3,000 people. And John Huss and Jerome, they pushed the writings all over Prague. Now, here's another fascinating thing, what we found. There were many students from all over Europe studying at the University of Prague. It was one of the most prestigious universities at the time. Many of them happened to be from Germany. Once John Huss talked to them about the writings of John Wycliffe, these German students actually dropped out of college and went back to Germany. And then they started this Reformation in Germany. And this is how Martin Luther came about. Because of these students who were influenced by John Wycliffe, and then they were influenced by John Huss, now he gets these writings, and he gets to see John Huss's writings, and he gets to see John Wycliffe's writings, and then now Martin Luther, he's studying all of this, and then he's convicted to post these 95 Theses. He posts that up. Now, here's the thing people don't realize. He didn't mean it to be something that would go all over Europe.
Right.
He posted that, and he just wanted to reform the church. It went all over Europe in a matter of weeks, which is crazy at the time because there were no cell phones and there were no text messages. Now, here's the part a lot of people don't realize. Just over the mountain is Switzerland, just over the Alps, and that's where Zwingli was. Zwingli heard about the 95 Theses of Martin Luther, and he posted something that was even better. Those were the 67 Theses that he posted up, and they were actually clearer theologically than Martin Luther's. He influenced, Martin Luther influenced Zwingli, and a lot of people don't realize they even had a meeting, Martin Luther and Zwingli, and they wanted to galvanize the movement together. But because of Martin Luther and Zwingli's disagreement on communion, Martin Luther said that the body of Christ, when you eat the bread, it's the actual body of Christ.
Right.
And Zwingli, on the other hand, said, no, it's not the actual body, it's symbolic. But God used Martin Luther, even in his off theology, to push the work forward. And then from Zwingli, in Switzerland, you had John Calvin. And people don't realize this, but he was actually from France. And he came to spend one night in Switzerland. And when he was there in Geneva, they talked him into pushing forward the work. And he came in and he changed the course of the church. John Calvin did. I actually saw the actual chair that he sat on. And then from John Calvin, you have John Smith. And John Smith was crucial because at the time when the Reformation had lost its steam, he came in when Zwingli died and Luther died, and he came in and he pushed the church even further. And he wanted to not only reform the Catholic Church, but reform the Anglican Church that the Catholic Church came from. So he basically wanted to reform the Reformed Church. And then from John Smith, you finally have John Wesley. And we were able to go back to London and to see the actual church that John Wesley preached at. And it's fascinating because John Wesley is the one who started the Methodist Church. And from the Methodist Church, we know what happens. That's where Christianity, what we know as modern-day Protestantism, the Seventh-day Adventist Church, came from the Methodist Church. So to be able to see how John Wycliffe contributed the Bible, how John Huss and Jerome contributed faithfulness to God, to die for their belief, and Martin Luther, justification, and Zwingli, church reform, and John Calvin, church organization, and John Smith, baptism by immersion, to John Wesley, sanctification. We get our roots, and we owe what we know and believe today to these great men who started these things.
And so you and all of your 50 students were able to experience this.
Yes.
Firsthand.
Firsthand.
You went to all these places. And I think how inspiring it must have been to find out that, hey, students actually played quite a pivotal role as well at the beginning for them.
Yes.
And it might have driven a lot home for the students themselves, for your students.
Yeah, it was. It was life-changing, and to be able to pass out glow in literature in all these places where these guys used literature to basically reform the church and to change the church was life-changing and something we'll never forget.
So that's what you guys did.
Yeah.
The students did, and they had their own experience at literature evangelism.
Yeah, thanks, Michael, for sharing that. That's fascinating that you guys were able to do that at the time that it actually occurred. And we want to just thank our audience for joining us for this episode of iTestify. There's a couple of key ways that you can support us. You can find us on LLBN.tv if you've been blessed and can support us financially. And also, we would covet your prayers as well. Thanks for joining.